The safety fence alarm went off with a level 3 lockdown. Police received a call that a student was armed and two other students had been taken hostage in the second floor restroom of my daughter's school. My daughter looked up to see the terror on her teacher's face, revealing this was not a drill. She was in the middle of an active shooter situation.
The Fresh Church Podcast.
Hi everyone, I'm Pastor Tony. Thank you for joining us. Today we're going to be discussing some crucial processes that you need to be aware of, how to handle emergency procedures. So let me ask you, are you ready in the event of an active shooter situation? Do you know where to evacuate your kids to in an emergency? Do you have a plan for fire, earthquakes, tornadoes, crazy weather? What happens if the scariest thing in the world happens on your watch? Are you ready? I really want to take some time today and dive into what we could really be a dark subject, but it needs to be discussed. If you're in leadership in a local church, you need to know what to do. You need to be watching for it constantly and ready to act accordingly. You need to have an emergency procedure in place. You see, we live in a different world now than ever before. I was listening to a song from the 90s talking about kids carrying guns to school. I remember certain schools having to search backpacks and set up metal detectors, but not my town. That was those bad inner city schools, right? Then Columbine happened in 1999 and forever changed the world for kids. 2012, when 21 first graders were killed at Sandy Hook Elementary. Two different high school shootings in 2018 where a fire alarm was pulled, leading to a total of 27 killed and 31 injured. 2022, the shooting in Uvalde, Texas, where 22 were killed and 18 were wounded. And it happens in churches also. Active shooters in the church world due to racial profiling go back before the Civil Rights Acts. But in recent years, it's moved beyond racial tension. I remember the shots fired at New Life in Colorado Springs in 2007. We'd attended that church just a few years before. We used to sit in the aisle where the gunman was taken down. At that time, I was at the City Church in Seattle, and we took the threat very seriously. It was the first time I had seen churches hire off-duty officers, check backpacks, and put systems to lock down classrooms in place. We learned a lot, but things have progressed. It was only a couple months ago that the shooting took place in Houston, Texas at Joel Osteen's church, and I'm friends with some of the leadership there. It was shocking. They were ready, as ready as you can be, but it still makes you wonder. It leaves you with a little bit of fear. That I personally experienced it in a new way. I will never forget the morning of April 16th. My wife texts me, "What's going on at the school?" She's sitting at work when she receives this text from a random number that says, "It's me, I'm alive." Outside her window, sirens go crazy as police, fire trucks, and ambulances scream by. Facebook lights up with all kinds of speculation. My 16-year-old daughter, using her friend's phone, texts mom to let her know there's a person in the school with a gun, but they've been evacuated safely. Life just got real. At 9:31 a.m., Christina was sitting in her biology class, finishing up state testing for English with her choir teacher overseeing the class. Suddenly, the safe defense alarm went off with a level 3 lockdown. This was not a drill. Police received a call that a student was armed and two other students had been taken hostage in the second floor restroom at her local high school. My daughter had an incredible teacher who quickly locked the room down. There was a connecting classroom to theirs where the teacher was not as calm. He actually opened the door to the hallway to see what was happening as the security guard ran through the halls yelling to lock down the rooms. Her teacher got the kids from both classes and evacuated out the exterior exit from the classroom. He brought them across the baseball field to the hotel access across the street, their safe place. Because of state testing, none of the kids were allowed to have their phones. My daughter's best friend had snuck hers, and now all 40 plus kids were trying to reach their parents while most of the school barricaded themselves inside rooms. The good news, it was a hoax. what they're calling a swatting call. The police were there in record time and secured the facilities. Everything went exactly as it was supposed to go. But for a couple thousand students, it was real, very real. I cleared my day and I went and I picked up my daughter. The unemotional one of the family hugged me and cried on my shoulder. I took her to lunch and just hung out with her all day. She shared the panic that she had felt, the fear that even once they were safe, she didn't know if her friends were even alive. Some students dealt with it by crying, some laughed, some created conspiracy theories. My daughter saw a problem and went looking for a solution. 2 days later, she met with her principal, and the next week, my daughter stood in front of the school board. She wanted them to hear from a student's perspective on what had happened. Her words, "I remember walking with my friend across the school fields as she hung on to me for dear life. The reaction of an entire class of kids breaking down in tears once they realized they were off campus and safe. The reality of going over an hour of not knowing if my other friends were alive. All the plans in the world do not matter in that moment. I had accepted death once I heard that alarm." My daughter's 16, and it crushed me when I heard her say, "I accepted death." And as she shared, I watched them hanging on the edge of her words, wiping tears from their eyes, then taking notes on ideas she was recommending they implement. The teachers have been trained thoroughly on what to do in their rooms. But in this situation, they were in other people's classrooms trying to figure it out. The students knew what a lockdown meant, but not what to do in that event. Some of the teachers froze. Some moved quickly, but all had a look of panic in their eyes. One classroom barricaded themselves in with such fervor they actually broke the side window by the door. Some evacuated to the other side of the building, only to find there wasn't enough room for all of them in the auditorium, and they were standing helpless in the giant cafeteria space. The first responders did everything correct. The teachers protected their students. There were processes in place, very expensive alarm systems, and procedures that even in a hoax revealed to us as parents that our kids were as safe as could be expected. So what if this happened in your church on a Sunday morning during a youth event or a VBS? Are you ready? I love visiting churches and doing assessments. Most of the time, I'm observing best practices as far as in their church or specific ministry, implementing the core values of Fresh: family, relationship, experience, safety, and hope. And part of the safety element is observing their emergency procedures. I get a kick at how some churches will brag to me about their processes. Some churches are pretty good, and some are in a world of hurt. Today, I'm going to help you as much as I can with a podcast. I mean, honestly, you need someone to come in and do an assessment of your place, someone who can give you an outside perspective. But let me share with you some real stories that might help you as you look over your area. So, church number one. A church in Pennsylvania that I did coaching with was in a town where literally the week before I arrived, another church in town had a person walk in the lobby with a guy demanding to see the pastor. The situation was quickly taken care of, de-escalated, and everything was okay. No one was hurt, but it provided a great opportunity for me to talk about safety with them. Right away, I was told how they had ushers in the hallway to provide safety, but their preschool room sat just off the lobby. One of the doors was a half door. The other door had no locks on it at all. There was no way to secure that room. Their nursery could be secured quickly, but there was no way to lock down the fellowship hall where their elementary kids were. The youth were in a separate portable with no ability to communicate between the two facilities if something had gone wrong. They weren't ready. So we worked on some of the details, and just a couple of weeks ago, I talked to the kids director who informed me how they had just put special covering on the windows in the lobby so they could not be broken easily in the event of someone trying to break into the locked building. I just asked this: how about the elementary locks? Have they been installed yet? They upgraded, but they're still missing a couple of the elements. Church number two. I visited a church in Kentucky who had recently upgraded all their safety protocols, including hiring a safety person. There were security members all over the campus, including hired police officers. There were more security members than there actually were ushers. Many of them were carrying firearms. 15 minutes into service, all of the doors were locked with security presence all over the place. Literally, I would have to have security in order to assist me to pick up my baby. They were making sure that it was safe. Each part of the campus had a security presence for all three of their services. I noticed two areas that were exposed, and they quickly addressed it. They took the couple steps they needed to do to make a difference to stop an outside aggressor. They appreciated the perspective. Church number 3. I talked with this pastor over coffee, and he shared how a homeless person off of medication came in during one of the services with a backpack that was causing issues in the lobby. His board members, who constitute their security team, were huddled together trying to figure out what to do. This pastor, while worship was happening in the auditorium, had to personally escort this other person outside while having another board member call the police. He thought he had a plan in place, but he found out that there was actually nobody that would implement it when the situation occurred. His team needed trained again. And finally, church number 4. Midweek, youth are meeting in a building during the summer. No other classes are meeting. It's just them. The front doors are locked. The back doors are open. The students meet upstairs, and as I access the building, I find an unmanned door. I walk through most of the facility with no one even knowing that I'm there. When I get upstairs, I bump into a volunteer who greets me, but does not address the fact that they don't know why I'm there. They don't address the fact that maybe I shouldn't be there, or why am I there? This could have been disastrous. Now they have a camera system, but no one's looking at it. In fact, when I asked, no one who was there that night even knew how to access it. No security, no door monitor, nothing to protect those kids inside. Oh, and those students were in a room without the ability to lock the internal doors if they heard something questionable happening outside. Now, your church probably fits somewhere in the middle. You have some processes, you have some security, you have a plan that some of you know about. The larger the church, the more involved the plan is. So let's talk about some basic emergency plans for a minute, and then we're going to talk about active shooter plans. First, does your church have a plan? Does your specific ministry have a plan? You need to discover it. I can send you my plan, but it's my plan, not yours. Discover what your church has in place, and if they haven't, there needs to be a bigger conversation. Call me and I'll help you as much as I can. Let's talk evacuation. Do you know where you're going in the event of an evacuation? Where are your safe zones? In all 4 of these churches, there was not an evacuation map anywhere in the classrooms. When you stay at a hotel and on the back of the door, they say, you are here and exit here, here, and here. And in the case of a fire, don't use the elevators, right? Where do you exit at your church? Where do people go to? Where's the safe zone? What happens if an emergency occurs? Does your team know what to do? Do you? All of my classrooms had maps telling my volunteer leaders where to take their kids. All of them had instructions posted in the event of an emergency. First, you need to know how to evacuate your students. Does your nursery have emergency evacuation cribs with wheels on the bottom that you can put them in and push them out? Don't be carrying kids under your arms trying to evacuate the building. Okay, be smart about it. Do you practice moving your preschool and elementary kids? Use bathroom breaks as a way to practice walking in line and following the leader. Do your students know in an evacuation to stay together? Where's your safety zone? Where would they go? The place where everyone meets in an event of an evacuation. Do your adults know not to pick up their kids until they've been released from those places? Do your volunteers know how to allow pickup after the evacuation? I was in the service of a very large church with about 1,000 people in the auditorium when right at the end of the sermon, I watched security quickly approach the pastor on stage. After a quick second, we were informed by the pastor that a backpack had been discovered plugged into a wall with a whirring sound inside one of the rooms of the church. He quickly let us know that we were to stay in the auditorium until a decision was made on what to do. A security person was at every door and no one was allowed to leave. We were then told that the children were being evacuated, but we were still asked to stay in place. Once the all clear was sounded, we were released to leave with clear instructions on where our children were and how to check them out from the lead pastor. He directed it. I watched another pastor friend of mine at a large church at the end of his sermon interrupted by a fire alarm. He stopped, gave quick instructions on how to evacuate the auditorium, where to pick up their children who had already been evacuated, then dismissed everyone. Church is over. There was an evacuation plan and they did it. Do you have a plan? Does your team know the plan? And will you enforce the plan? So let's talk specific situations. Do you have a plan for fire? earthquakes, severe weather based on the geographic area that you live in, hurricanes, earthquakes, tornadoes, forest fires, snowstorms. I live in the Midwest, and this year we've had a record number of tornadoes. Most churches do not have a tornado plan because, well, we don't live in Oklahoma. Well, you still need a plan. Write it out, post it, and practice it on occasion. We have an evacuation plan. We have an emergency plan for events. How often should you practice and communicate them? My opinion, whether you're dealing with kids' classrooms, student ministry, or adults, there needs to be communication at least once a month. But we're so limited with our time. Do I really want to waste time when I could be preaching or teaching? Yes. That's why safety is one of our core values. You need to let the people in your church know that they can trust you, that you're competent enough to know what to do. So let's go back to the school incident with my daughter. Every year, the teachers do an in-service day to discuss safety measures, evacuation processes, how to handle an active shooter. They communicate that to us as parents and the students. It builds trust. We watch the schools do 3 or 4 low-level lockdowns each throughout the semester due to possible risk or ambulances or anything like that. It isn't the boy crying wolf. It's letting us know they are ready. When we had that situation occur, I trusted that the school and the local law enforcement were on it because they communicated their safety procedures ahead of time to us, and we knew that they had practiced them. Pastor, tell your congregation on a regular basis the safety elements that you have and what would happen in an emergency. Let them know you have a plan. I hear it every time I get on a plane, right? There's 2 exits to the right and 2 to the left. Well, it's my responsibility to listen to that. Okay, you have a responsibility to share it with them. And the trust level goes up with your congregation every time you do that. Then when it's time to upgrade your doors and safety elements, it makes it a whole lot easier to take a special offering. Student pastor, all of your students probably know more about you do when it comes to evacuating emergency procedures. Rather than just telling them, give them the opportunity to speak into it. They always love to give an opinion, right? Show them the map, show them where the safety zone is, ask if there's a better way we can do it. You can actually practice evacuating, they'll love it if they think that their ideas are the ones you're going to use in the future. Let them own the safety element of your church. Kids, don't freak them out, but they are used to practicing fire drills and evacuations. So practice with them at least quarterly. More than that, make sure your volunteers are trained. Discuss it on a regular basis. Discuss what it looks like for each class, both in your facilities and with certain age groups. If a volunteer gets moved to the nursery last minute to help and there's an evacuation, they know what to do. As the leader, do you know what you should be doing, where you should be going, what the process looks like? How are you communicating to your team? Do they have radios and are they actually turned on? Can you text people and will they respond? Have you practiced it? If you have a fire go off, alarm go off, do all the alarms work? You know, we had a fire alarm go off once because a 5-year-old pulled the alarm in one of the classrooms. That we were able to radio facilities and quickly defuse the situation before anyone was evacuated or the fire department was dispatched. But as we talked about it later, my nursery coordinator informed me that they had heard something from down the hall but wasn't even sure what it was. That the fire alarm in their room was not working. The strobe lights did not go off. They had no idea what was happening. Time to run a test during the week in all of your rooms to see what would really happen. Another time we practiced an evacuation only to find out that the safety zone had been moved, but no one had communicated that to me. I was getting chewed out for having my kids in the wrong place, and I didn't know it. I guess the place we were using had been changed because it was near a storage area that a large propane tank was at, which would make sense not to hang out there in the case of an emergency. Okay, so we've discussed having a plan. We've discussed evacuation processes and having a plan posted. We've touched lightly on emergency procedures for fire, weather, and other issues. Now we need to talk about the big one, active shooters. Let me start by reading to you what I have in my KidMin handbook at the top of my emergency procedures page. Although we have faith that there will never be a situation on our campus, wisdom mandates we prepare in the event of an emergency. So to clarify, I'm not a worrywart or a Debbie Downer. I'm not looking for all crazy things out there that can get me if I'm not being careful. I have faith. I believe God will protect me, my church, and the people that I have the responsibility over. But I also see a clear mandate in the Bible to take care of the people that I am over. I mean, a shepherd looks over his flock, right? Psalms 23 makes it very clear. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. I'm not afraid because there is a reminder that everything's going to be all right. There is a rod or a staff that directs me accordingly. So lead your sheep and be ready in every situation. Nehemiah rebuilt the city walls of Jerusalem with instructions to his people to have a tool in one hand and a weapon in the other to be ready. I have faith that nothing's going to happen. I also have wisdom that I've prepared in the event that it does. So let's wrap up our time together by returning to our original conversation. Let's talk active shooter. How can we be prepared? Whether you're a pastor, a director, or overseer, whether you work with kids, students, or adults, you need to have a plan. I was on staff at a large church in California, and our operations pastor took safety very seriously. He was the kind of guy who listened to the police scanner at night, and he had a great relationship with a local police department. Beyond that, the sheriff and district attorney and several officers attended our church. Safety was important. My life was forever changed when we invited our local SWAT team to run drills and practice after active shooter situations on our property, in our facilities. As staff, we were allowed to participate as they went through 3 different scenarios. The first was in the offices, having a gunman enter the lobby and take the lead pastor hostage in his office. The second was a mass shooting in the auditorium during a service. And the third was in a classroom, specifically to help with our charter school that met during the week. But I also used it as an opportunity to help evaluate how our kids' ministry would be handled in those same situation, in those same rooms. Again, this was just a testing, a practice with our SWAT team. But my life was forever changed. We were taught from the beginning that in these kind of situations, you have to make a choice quickly. You hide, you fight back, or you evacuate, you run. I've heard all kinds of cute words for how to remember it. My daughter's school says fight, defend, or flee. You honestly have no idea what you will do until you are in this situation right in front of you. You can train all day, but you won't know until it happens. Can I share with you what occurred in each situation? It forever changed my perspective on active shooters. I thought I was ready, and I went home a little shook up at the end of the day, and will never forget what happened. Keep in mind, each scenario, we had an idea of what was going to happen. We knew that real guns were being used, but they were all safe and marked accordingly. We knew that no one would actually be harmed. But when you're in the moment, it's hard not to be literally in the moment. So the first scenario, I was in my office when suddenly I heard yelling in the hall. I stepped outside my door to find what was happening, to see a man approaching me with our front desk receptionist in front of him. He was yelling about wanting to see the pastor. I stopped him and asked if I could help him, and I tried to defuse the situation. He waved his gun at me, and instantly I had the urge to attack, to stop him. He had a defenseless employee in front of him, and there were all kinds of people around us. I wanted to protect them. Then I remembered, this is a drill, okay? And this isn't about what I'm going to do in the situation. It's about to help the police in this situation, the SWAT team. So I quietly stepped back into my office, shut the door, and locked it. I sat quietly in the corner. Once it was quiet, I stepped out and evacuated the place. We waited outside until the all clear was sounded. They'd finished the scenario. Now, I don't have a military background. I don't consider myself a brave person, but leaders lead. And in that scenario, my natural instinct was to address the situation and protect those that I had been entrusted with. The second one had people all over the auditorium pretend to be wounded or dead with fake blood, so it'd be something real for the officers coming in. I learned that police first focus on taking out the shooter, then they come back and evacuate, and then they begin triage. But stopping the shooter is a top priority. I was a bystander in the auditorium when the scenario occurred. As the shooter walked through, another officer walked with him. As the man entered the auditorium, I felt a hand on my shoulder and the assisting officer go, "Bang, you're dead." I dropped to the ground and I lay there for the remainder of the role play. I had an officer check my pulse at one point and then move on. It was eerie. Finally, we ran the third scenario in the classroom area. When the call came over the radio, there was a man with a rifle, and I went into Pastor Tony mode. We had 3 buildings worth of classrooms behind the church offices with all of their doors on the outside. You see, in California, they don't build hallways, they build exterior exits because of the beautiful weather. And in this drill, one of the buildings was used for the kids' ministry, the other for the charter school. Now, remember, the focus of this drill was a charter school, but I wanted to be involved as well. So once the call went out, I quickly ran around checking the doors on the outside of the building to make sure that they were locked. I had checked about half the rooms and was getting ready to go around the corner when I heard over the radio, "Gunman is passing by the bathrooms at the B building." Literally just around the corner from where I was. I stopped and was able to quickly step into the classroom behind me and secure it. Now, remember, this was a scenario, but as I found myself sitting alone in that classroom for the next 30 minutes while the scenario played out, I found myself reliving the day. For all intents and purposes, I'm dead. I mean, in the office, I would have probably taken a direct shot if the gunman was actually serious. In the auditorium, I was one of the first people to be shot, and I didn't have time to react. In the classroom situation, only a radio call kept me from walking face to face into the gunman. It shook me up. It made me realize all the ideas that I had about what might happen and how I would handle it would probably cost me my life. So let me encourage you. If you can attend an active shooter training class in your community, do it. Contact your local police department and ask. If you can participate in these school trainings, do it. Ask your school administrators if they can be involved. I mean, what's the worst thing they can say? No? Talk to some of the teachers and school administrators, maybe talk to you one-on-one and get ideas from them. If you ever have the chance to participate in a SWAT or active shooter real-life training, volunteer now. So what can you do to be prepared? 1, have a plan put together and communicate it to your team. Do they know when it's okay to stay and to go? Do they know how to shut off the lights and move the kids around from the doors? Do they know how to address someone trying to enter the room? Number 2, make sure classroom facilities have locks. We even had deadbolts on our bathroom doors. If you have breakaway bars, they have cool Velcro straps that you can use so the doors are always locked. Pull the Velcro off, pops it, no one can get in. Make sure your doorknobs have buttons on the back. Most of your volunteers don't have keys. Do they have a way to secure the room? Number 3, can your windows be covered? Blinds, specialty blinds. Maybe you need to save some money, put poster paper over it, cut it to size and have it ready to go. Our church had metal doors and glass along the edge of the door frames for the safety reasons. That way we could monitor what was happening inside. But if we needed to secure the room, on the back of the door, I had taken just some black poster board with Velcro on it. So it was on the door. I could peel it off and slap it in the window quickly. I wanted to make sure we could close those rooms down. Number 4, do you have a safety backpack in your room? You can find these online or at least obtain a supply list so that your leaders have basic items in the room and that they know where it's located. And then number 5, train, discuss, prepare for the situation, not in fear, and certainly be sensitive to the different ages, but make sure that you and your team are ready. I always told my team, once you lock down the room, don't open the door for anyone, including me. You never know who's being used as a human shield. For a volunteer, that could even mean their own child. We always had secondary places to send people to that we could lock down separately. Additionally, we were told, hey, you know what? If you're not certain if that police officer is an actual officer or not, call 911, double check or verify their badge number. You're going to find out what's really happening. Little things that we learned in specific situations. Well, I want to end our time with this. Psalm 37:3. It says, trust in the Lord and do good. Then you'll live safely in the land and prosper. This is a verse of hope, a verse of encouragement that we trust God, but we're also going to do good. We're going to trust that God's going to take care of it. It's going to be okay, but I'm going to do the things that I need to do so that I can live safely in the land and I can prosper. Lord, I pray just safety right now and protection over these leaders. Give them wisdom and faith to be prepared for such a situation that no one will be injured on our watch. Lord, that you'll protect us. But either way, we will live in your safety and we will prosper. In Jesus' name, amen. All right, so as we wrap up, that was a lot of stuff. There was a lot of things in there, a lot of stories in there. Hopefully you got something from it. Just a couple little comments as we hear what we call fresh access as we kind of wrap up here. You got to understand that the bigger the church, the bigger the target. But that doesn't necessarily always hold true. I mean, all it takes is one person who doesn't like your church, your pastor, your thing, or maybe nothing to do with you, something that just inspired them on social media, and you could have a situation on your hand. You never know when something destructive is going to happen, so be ready. Let me encourage you with this: invest in a security team. And I'm not talking just Sunday mornings. You do youth services, lock ins, all those special things. You need a security team present. You need people there who know what they're doing. I mean, you wouldn't want to make decisions from a medical perspective. Don't try to make high end decisions on safety stuff. Have people there who know what they're talking about. And here's a tip for you just to help you out as we close out. Find another church, maybe a bigger church in your area, another church you're connected with that has a solid safety program. I love this. I've got a friend. He is a retired police officer, and him and his buddy, who used to be special forces, they love safety elements. They love talking about it. And all I have to do is say, "Hey guys, what have you learned recently?" And 2 hours later, they're still downloading information into me. People who are on security teams love to talk about what they do. They love to talk about how to create safe environments. And if you buy them lunch, they'll probably help you out, give you some ideas for your church. All right. Well, hey, I am so thankful that you are listening to this. And because you've hung out all the way to the end, I want to give you just a free something to help you out. I would love to give you just my 1-page emergency procedure form that we have. This we had posted in our room, and you'll need to adjust and adapt it for your own church, for your own situation. But it gives you kind of a guideline, kind of a direction as far as what that could look like. And so do me a favor, send me an email to info@freshkidmin.org. and just put the word emergency in the title. And I'll send you that basic emergency package. Again, info@freshkidmin.org. Put the word emergency on there. And while you're doing it, share with me a couple things that you learned, or maybe a couple things that you learned that you'd love to share with me that I can share with other people, because we're all in this together in faith and wisdom, creating a safe environment for our kids. I'll see you guys next time on the Fresh Church Podcast.